Okay, so hello and welcome. My name is Katie. I am with ProNotary, and today I have Justin Capek here. He is from Capek Law. So I wanted to thank you so much for coming online.
It's my pleasure.
Sure.
Happy to be here.
So I have a variety of different questions, but give me a little bit of background on how long you've been an attorney for and kind of what made you get into this.
So I've been an attorney for approximately 8 years. This is my eighth year of practice. I started out as an associate at this firm. Ultimately, we did a lot of criminal and personal injury. Um, this past year, we kind of expanded our criminal a lot more. So now we have three lawyers that work just specifically doing criminal defense in Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Delaware. It's myself, my partner, Phil Steinberg, and our associate, Nick Keurig. I got into law ultimately after going to college and being in the Army for a period of time. I had graduated college with somewhat a lack of direction as to where I wanted to go with my career and my degree.
Mhm.
Ultimately went to law school. Upon completion of law school, I had worked at a workman's comp firm for a little bit of time, probably about 4 months, realized I was unhappy and transitioned into private criminal defense, which is where I've been for the past 8 years. We also do personal injury, car accidents, slip and falls, things of that nature. But I've been somewhat of a jack of all trades and a master of none. But ultimately, I specialize in criminal defense, mainly weapons offenses, violent crime, narcotics, gangs, and dangerous drug offenders. So that's really kind of the overview of our practice as it stands right now in 2025.
And is that the direction that you already were kind of going into, or was like there anything that made you want to get into that like niche of industry?
So with regard to criminal defense, I mean, it's really kind of dictated upon the area that you live in. So we live in a big metropolitan area, surrounded by three other states, and the majority of crime that occurs here is firearm related, narcotics related, or some variety or combination of both. So we do a lot of homicides, non-fatal shootings, weapons offenses, weapons trafficking. Mostly the narcotics offenses tend to be somewhat waning, waxing and waning in how frequent they are.
Mhm.
With New Jersey, it tends to be a lot more frequent with narcotics offenses and weapons offenses. But in Philadelphia alone, we get more than our fair share of shootings and weapons and narcotics offenses. So that's the bulk of it. That's mostly driven. It doesn't mean that we don't get other very unique and somewhat strange cases once in a while, but I would say the vast majority of it is weapons, narcotics, and violent crime.
So when you say weapons, is it just basically that they are carrying a firearm that they're not typically supposed to be, or like is that pretty much the type of cases that you see?
So firearms ownership in Pennsylvania, we have some of the best, well, I want to say the best, but the most freedom with regard to who can own a firearm in Pennsylvania. And in
Mhm.
Philadelphia specifically, you have to have what's called a permit to carry that firearm. Regardless of whether you own that firearm or not, you have to be able to carry it. If you're a convicted felon, you're not supposed to possess or carry that firearm whatsoever. So a big majority of cases involve individuals who are either stopped in a vehicle or they're stopped on the street and they don't have a permit to carry. And those people typically have owned their firearm, but they don't have a permit to carry. And they conflate the two, they conflate ownership with an automatic permit to carry, which is not always the case. So that's a very frequent fact pattern. Another thing that we get a lot is people who are convicted felons who nonetheless they obtain a firearm illegally and then they carry it. And that's inarguably more serious because they're a prohibited person under statute, and that penalty is vastly more significant and more severe than someone who owns a firearm and is either mistaken or accidentally carries it or something like that. So those are really the two classes of people that we get. Either it's people who just don't have a permit, but they otherwise are able to lawfully own a firearm versus people who are statutorily precluded from having a firearm by virtue of a felony conviction. And then they carry an illegal firearm or something that has an obliterated serial number or some sort of obliterating mark with regard to that firearm and, ghost guns, especially too.
Okay. And then so the other thing that I wanted to ask you is you have a little bit of a different way of marketing. Can you go into that? Because that's how I found you.
Certainly. So with regard to like our marketing, we typically don't do the whole billboard and commercial thing where you see like it's a billboard and there's either like a bunch of cash around somebody and it's very cartoonish or again I think that there's a big cookie cutter marketing scheme for lawyers that is not just necessarily endemic to Philadelphia, but kind of across the country. I mean, you see it with Morgan and Morgan or these other lawyers that it's very flamboyant and kind of in your face, and it talks about how much money they get for people and what can they do for you, and it's very cartoonish in that sense, and it's casting an extremely wide net and just trying to bring everything in.
Mhm.
So the marketing that we've tried to do through our firm is to do something that's a little bit more lifestyle based and more kind of catchy and conducive to what the Instagram algorithm is going to do. So we do all of our marketing through Instagram right now,
Mhm.
and we do it through Reels. Basically, like the theme with Reels and kind of the trend that I've seen in the past couple of years is people want quick attention. They want a lot of transitions. They want smooth cinematography, and they want a message to be digested within the first five to 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So our marketing, when we do our videos, like you saw with my boxing video, it does a lot of transitions. It's very lifestyle based, and we try to focus it on what are my clients looking for in a lawyer? Are they looking for like a traditional guy that's just going to yell at them on a screen and tell them how much money they're going to get? Are they going to looking for someone who is more in tune with kind of the culture or and the city that they live in, so on and so forth. So that's really kind of the segue that we've tried to do with marketing is take a little bit more of an unconventional approach to marketing, especially on Instagram, and make it more so, entertaining rather than just in your face and somewhat almost I see it as kind of silly with these other ads, and it's not you're not going to really gain your trust and your faith in your clients by just yelling at them and making them sign kind of these promises that aren't necessarily, things that you can keep. So I
Mhm.
try to avoid that and I try to make it more informative, especially with, our car accident commercial that we did, just really informing them is this is kind of what you're going to experience when you're in a car accident. This is what you should know. This is what rights you have. And this is why having a lawyer can really be the difference in getting a settlement or not, rather than just kind of taking this sort of snake oil salesman approach of just call us and we're going to get you as much money as you can.
I like it because it makes it like at least for me for the ads and everything, the way that you marketed, it's like more that I know more about you, rather than just like some large faceless law firm that I might not ever talk to a real person. So I think that is a little bit of an interesting approach. And honestly, like I think that marketing has changed so much from what it was in the very beginning that I think once people start coming out of like the faceless business and actually like putting themselves out there as like I'm going to be your lawyer, it makes a huge difference. So that's primarily like all you do. How many leads typically do you get from your Instagram? Like, do you have a specific, or is it kind of hard to quantify?
It's hard to quantify. Ultimately, I would say it depends kind of on any given ad campaign. But normally, what I do is I'll run each campaign at a week at a time.
Mhm.
And so when we put the money in, we boost the ad and we run it for 7 days. And it'll give me analytics through Meta as exactly how many follows I got, how many DMs I got, how many comments, likes, so on and so forth. But I would say on average between, 3 campaigns that I can run at any given time, I would say it generates between 5 and 10 cases that actually aren't just a lead, but they come in, they sign up, and they bear fruit. So it seems small in retrospect, but if you take that 5 lead or 5 client per week, and you take that from per week at 52 weeks in a year, it ends up being over 250 to 260 clients, which again is a lot. And the amount of money that you generate per person per case, whether it's criminal or whether it's civil, meaning personal injury, car accident, stuff like that, you can't quantify it, but each one is valuable in and of itself.
Mhm.
So I can't really tell you exactly the quality of those leads, but I would say it's about 5 people that come in, sign up, and lock in with our firm.
Okay. So, I mean, I think like obviously for this, the return on investment, because sometimes when I see that other companies or other software or other marketing companies that like go towards law firms, they have to pay per leads. Have you ever done that? And have you ever found that to be helpful?
So I've gotten a lot of emails like where these people that reach out and they say, "Hey, we can hook you up with leads,"
Hmm.
but I just don't. I've never locked into it, and I've never tried it just because I don't feel one. I like to generate leads organically,
Yeah.
and two, because these people will generate a lead for you, but then they expect a certain portion in return.
Hmm.
So if you take that lead and that fee ends up not being very high, you're not getting a good return on investment for your time versus what that case is going to be. And so ultimately, like if for example, a lead service will give me a case that would be a $5,000 fee and they want one third of that back, I'm working at a deficit at that point.
Hmm.
And if I and I'm incurring all the costs, I'm incurring all the time. So I'm already at a $1,500 at a, give or take, or, I think maybe a little, I'm not good at math. That's why I'm a lawyer, but I'm working at a deficit. So it ends up not being really fruitful for me.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, I do get referrals from other lawyers, and that's a different way of generating business between colleagues rather just taking a lead service that doesn't really give you good quality cases. And what I'm looking for is quality clients, people that are looking to hire a sophisticated law firm for sophisticated cases and not just something that is kind of run of the mill or like a traffic ticket that again really is going to cost me money to litigate. So I haven't done those lead services, and again I can't really speak to whether or not they bear fruit or not, but it's just not a space that I feel I want to delve into in terms of generating leads.
Yeah. I mean, from all of the other things that I've looked into as far as the lawyers that buy leads, it doesn't really make sense. And then also, like, I think that what you've done is really, really smart because, if for whatever reason they go out of business or they don't have it anymore, like your leads dry up. But if you're using Instagram, and you taught yourself, then like basically you can always get more leads, more ads. So that's interesting.
And the organic, I mean, once you generate those leads, I mean, you and I both know once you have an organic lead, that person will then refer you to other people and refer you to other people.
Mhm.
So you have less reliance on Instagram to bring in new leads because you're relying on old clients that you've had that are now giving you that word of mouth, organic, free marketing, and that nothing beats that. I mean, the cost benefit to that is invaluable compared to just pumping advertisements, pumping leads, trying to get it that way. And I just think that for certain types of lawyers, that model of getting lead generation can work. But for a model like mine for criminal defense, where you're intimately involved in someone's freedom and they're probably helping them navigate the most unpleasant experience of their life, you want it to be more personal and you want it to be more tailored to what their needs are going to be.
Yeah. And then like I think that's sometimes what people don't really realize is that after you get the client base, basically, and this is the same for almost every business, is after you get the client base, word of mouth referrals kind of can bolster your entire business so that you might not have to start marketing as much at all. But my next question that I had for you is what are the typical documents that you see both in personal injury and then I really wanted to like hammer home about the criminal aspect of it.
So to start with personal injury, the typical documents that we see that need to be notarized, a lot of times are just certain affidavits. So, for example, in Pennsylvania, if someone doesn't have private health insurance, meaning they have health insurance either through Medicaid or some other city, county, or statewide sponsored program, we have to have them sign an affidavit that says that I have no private health insurance. And that's important because that goes to their billing. So if they have no private health insurance, then it gets billed out of their first party policy with regard to a car accident, their a portion of their medical bills. And then we're obligated to then check to see if they have any other second, health insurance policy that picks up as a secondary billing party. So if they don't have that, that's something that has to get signed. And typically we have one or two people that are notaries in addition to paralegals in-house that
Hmm.
can do that. So that's a very easy thing to tackle with regards to personal injury because most of that stuff is done in-house.
Yeah.
Where it segues into the criminal, and I would say it becomes more important for and more advantageous to have someone that can do remote notary services, or notary services that are not necessarily local to where I work,
Hmm.
is I do a lot of post-conviction relief work. So a lot of guys who are bringing new evidence claims after they've been in jail for a certain amount of times, or they've discovered a witness that wants to recant their story. So the way that we memorialize that is we need to reach out and find that witness. And if we can find that witness, we then need to take a statement from them. And
Hmm.
once we take a statement from them, we memorialize that statement, but that statement then needs to be notarized. And a lot of times these people are not in Philadelphia, they're not in New Jersey, they're not in Delaware. They've moved, who knows where. I've had people in Florida, I've had people in California, people in Arizona. So it becomes, cumbersome for us to not be able to get that notarized if I can't physically be out there, if I can't interview them out there.
Hmm.
So a lot of times if I interview them over the phone, or if I interview them in kind of the same fashion that we have today, it's a lot easier for me to be able to rely on a remote notary service to plug me in with somebody that can notarize that statement for them out
Hmm.
there and then send it back to me for submission.
So I have a question. When you are taking that statement, do you have to have that recorded? Is that through like a Zoom, or is that just basically based on?
I mean, sometimes it depends. I mean, since Zoom exploded in 2020, it does become easier to take certain statements, but
Mhm.
it kind of depends. I like paper, and the courts tend to like stuff that you can file with your document.
Okay.
So what I will typically do is, if someone is a witness to, or wants to recant their statement or advise their statement, I will send an investigator out, because I can't be as the lawyer, I can't be a witness to that statement. So
Okay.
I'll have the investigator go out, who's typically, again, not a notary, but
Hmm.
can go out and take that statement based on what I'm looking for from that person. And prior to me submitting that, what I always do is I have that statement notarized, because if they sign the statement John Smith, we don't know if that's really the John Smith that signed that statement. And when they go before a notary, they have to present an ID, and then there's an independent self-authenticating portion of that when it goes through a notary, and it makes it much more credible and much more difficult to refute as being authentic when I submit that as in a formal filing.
So when you have investigators go out, like who are those people? Are they like law officers, or it's just like?
So in a lot of states, especially like in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, you can
Mhm.
get private investigators who are licensed, either former law enforcement officers or private investigators. I have, our top person that we use, if the client can afford it, is we have a former FBI agent,
Mhm.
and she was like a very highly decorated case agent. She did a lot of political, corruption cases in Philadelphia. And so she will go out there, but she's a licensed private investigator, but on her, CV, she worked for the DOJ for 20 years. So those are people that we tend to send out, because they're a lot more thorough. They have a law enforcement background. But for simple things, whether it's just getting a statement from somebody, I can send out a less experienced, or more, I guess, price friendly investigator to do something like that. Whereas if I'm looking for somebody, or if I'm looking for evidence, or if I'm really doing some sort of forensic examination, then I need to send out a more qualified former law enforcement officer.
And then the other thing that I wanted to kind of highlight, and I don't know if you had ever really delved into it, but going as a notary into like detention centers or anything like that, have you done that a lot, or do you typically always use detention centers notaries if they provide them?
It depends on the urgency, but what I can tell you is the any sort of jail is going to have a notary on site, because I mean people are going to have documents that they need notarized, whether it's a birth
Mhm.
certificate, a power of attorney, so on and so forth. But they have limited access to that, so they can only access that at certain times, and it can be very time consuming for those people and very inconvenient. Like for example, if you have an individual who needs to sign that birth certificate. That birth certificate has to be the original birth certificate has to be mailed to that inmate, and then you're risking it getting lost in the mail, and then it has to get provided to that inmate, and then that inmate has to sign that document, make time to go to the notary that's on site, and then re-sign it and put it in the mail and send it back. Whereas, when other clients I've had where they want to sign, for example, a power of attorney form where they're giving over rights to make any sort of distributions with their property, with their bank accounts, with their vehicles, with their medical records or anything like that, that are somewhat more urgent, what we'll do
Mhm.
is we'll bring in a notary to an attorney meeting, and I'll bring that document with me, and then they'll sign that document in front of me, and then I can have that physical document, provided to the client's, agent or whoever's going to be doing it
Mhm.
afterwards. So they can sign that document as the principal with the notary, and then the remaining signatures can be notarized separately at outside of that detention center. So it really depends on what their level of urgency is, but I have found that it's significantly more advantageous to have someone that could go in with me at a specific time, especially given my busy schedule, come in, notarize it, and it's done for the family.
Mhm. And so, like, my next question, because within my industry, everybody always thinks that, like, they might as well not advertise or market to lawyers because, like, as a notary, because they think that everybody else has already gone out and like marketed towards the lawyers. Has any notary marketed towards you aside from me?
No, I've never had any notaries market towards us, and I think that especially in our area where you can have paralegals that are also function as notaries, it
Mhm.
becomes like an easy in-house thing, and it becomes more of a need-based service for very specific scenarios like what I have. But I would say typically most personal injury lawyers are going to have paralegals or notaries that work in-house, so because it's just going to be more efficient.
Mhm.
But criminal lawyers like me are going to have that need for a remote notary sometimes, not every day, but in a case where I need to send an investigator out and then have it something notarized, or I need to have something notarized in Arkansas, and I'm not going to go travel to Arkansas where I have a witness that's out there. So it
Mhm.
benefits us in a lot of ways to be able to reach out to you and say, hey, I need a notary in Little Rock, Arkansas to go and notarize this witness document, rather
Mhm.
than me have to call around, arrange for it, and rely on kind of my own efforts to find somebody that will go out and do it versus a service that you can offer where you can cut the middleman out and make everything really streamlined and efficient for me.
Yeah, so thank you for validating because everyone's like, oh, I'm not going to go into any law firms because, XYZ. And it's like, no, I really don't think that anyone as a notary is marketing towards. I mean, it seems like I'm the only one that goes out and markets directly. So my other question to you is, like more logistical. Do you have access to the people that are in like, let's say they're in prison? Do you have access to their IDs as the lawyer? Or like, how do they, like, what happens to their IDs?
So their IDs typically get put on their property, but again, it's when you're basically purporting that that person's going to be who they are because they've already been vetted and identified. So they have an inmate number. They know they have a picture of on their armband. So they wear like an armband, like where I'm wearing my watch, where it
Hmm.
has their picture and their name and their date of birth. So it's somewhat of a self-identifying, you know, way to do that where they're not in possession of their physical ID.
Okay. And then when you say it's on their property, what does that mean?
So they all personal property, like if I were to get arrested, like
Hmm.
my suit, my tie, my watch, my cell phone, that would all go into a bag and that gets placed in a locker while I'm in custody locally. And then
Okay.
ultimately when you're released from custody, you can come back and pick all your property up.
Okay, I didn't know that. I think I would have to look up how to kind of, I mean, this is just a side note. I would have to look up how to notarize the documents because typically we would need either a driver's license or a passport. But I would have to look up like state guidelines to see about how to use like an inmate's thing. But that's just a side note. Sorry, that's a side note for me. So okay, I think the other thing that I wanted to hit home on is, do you typically recommend for people that might be going into like incarceration to get a power of attorney, or is that like almost a case by case?
I think it's a case by case basis more so because when you go into jail, your life is somewhat flipped upside down if you're not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
People will be there for you and certain people will not be there for you. So a lot of times I caution against people getting power of attorneys if they're not married, if it's like, hey, I want my girlfriend to do this or I want my sister or my brother, because I explained to them very clearly, if when you get this power of attorney form, you are essentially signing over every legal right that you have to anything to
Hmm.
someone else. And you can't come back and say, they shouldn't have sold that car. They shouldn't have sold that house. They shouldn't have emptied my bank account. They shouldn't have bought this. They shouldn't have bought that. Because at that point, you've given that person discretion. And although they have a fiduciary duty as your agent to not, commit frivolous spending, that's a whole thing you have to deal with on the back end. So I typically tell people, if unless it's really important for you to, if you're going away for 20 years and your wife needs access to your bank account and you don't have a joint bank account, or she needs to sell the car, that's a whole different story. But people who are, not going away for a significant period of time, or they want to sign it over to mom or dad, is typically better. But I try to caution against people signing it over to their girlfriend because, or their boyfriend, or someone who they've been dating for a short period of time, because
Hmm.
it's just not a smart and wise decision to do. People switch up on you when you go to jail.
Is that something that's common that you kind of have to caution against? Is
Oh yeah, frequently. And I tell people, I say, look, I'm happy to bring it down for you, but I'm not gonna sign off on it. I'll bring you a blank form if you want to use that form, and you can do that, but I'm not gonna sign off on it or co-sign it. And they understand that they're revocable, but at the same time, once you do that,
hmm.
all bets are off.
Yeah.
If someone wants to empty your bank account or sell your house, or do what else they're gonna do with your money or your property, it's problematic.
I used to work in finance, and I've seen that where there is an elderly person that has signed away, a good majority, and then sometimes the kids have like spent the person's retirement, and then it's like, well, I can't do anything, like you're the one that did this and put them on the account, and then they came in and took it all. So
Right.
like, yeah, that's unfortunate. But I just wanted to see if like but typically, how often do you see power of attorneys when people are going into like jail for, I guess, maybe more than a year?
I would say it's pretty consistent if it's more than 5 years.
Okay.
Most of the time, if it's more than 5 years, I'll usually will, oblige the family and help them prepare a power of attorney, because that's not an insignificant amount of time. I mean, that's a
Mhm.
half a decade, and people have rent and bills. I mean, I've had some more sophisticated clients that have needed to, you know, have more power of attorneys because they have a property, or they want to sell their property, or they have a tenant in the property and need someone to manage it. But you know, most people who are going to jail for things that are not necessarily like high level, like white collar crime, are not really, they don't really have a lot of assets.
Okay.
So it's not very often. I would say even, the high level narcotics dealers that I represent, like they don't keep anything in their name. They keep everything they kind of keep it separated. So they don't really have a lot of property that's tied to them that they need to dispose of.
Okay.
It's already kind of pre-taken care of and baked into the cake. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's just the way it is.
I didn't think about it like that, but that's, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. So okay, is there anything that you see as far as the notarizations or anything like that that are like mistakes that you think that notaries should like pay attention to?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that we've had that I've had to deal with that's really frustrating is
Hmm.
misdating something. So if I have a date of signature where it says March 22nd, 2025, and all my signatures are March 22nd, 2025, and then they put the wrong date, every single time that that's been tried to use at any sort of banking institution, they will not take it because they can't verify that signature as being on the same day.
Oh,
So that is the one thing that I guess is the most difficult thing is, when it's not dated the right way. I've other issues I've run into with notaries is they spell someone's name wrong. And sometimes people have, again, you think at the most basic level, that would be like the first thing that you check.
yeah.
Or they spell an address wrong, or they put the wrong address, and you know, I'm a stickler, double and triple checking stuff, and that's just a
Mhm.
symptom of my time in the army. But just triple check your stuff, make sure it looks right, because there's nothing more frustrating than when a client's trying to do something with a power of attorney, and they take the time, they go there, they take it to like Bank of America, and they think they're going to have access to that funny, and they just say, nope, sorry, we can't take it. And you have to go through the whole process all over.
I actually was just speaking with a client that had done that. Like because like as notaries, sometimes we have to deal with other notaries' mistakes. And so they were like, "Hey, I went to this random bank to get stuff notarized, like which PSA for anyone that's out there, don't always go to the bank to get things notarized, because like those notaries aren't necessarily trained and they're not always able to notarize documents for just anyone.
And
And
they
so
won't double check their work most of the time either. So
exactly. It's like I was a notary, like, and I didn't always necessarily know what I was doing as far as some of these documents. So just make sure that you go with someone that's like trained on how to do the notarizations. But yeah, so they had it done at a random bank and then they had to get it redone by me because it didn't work. Like they forgot their stamp, which is pretty significant. So yeah, same thing. Look over all of your documents before you
definitely.
send them on their way, because she was like, "This is missing something, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, the stamp. That's like the biggest thing."
Most important, the seal on the document,
Yeah,
the only
like
thing that matters.
yeah, it's the only yeah, but and then before we go, how can people find you? Because, like obviously we never know who our audience is. How do we find you in case we wanted to work with you?
So you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is @_KPAC_, and that is our personal page for my personal page for my law firm. You can also find us. Our toll-free number is 877 KPAC Law, which is KPACLAW. It's toll-free. It goes right to my cell phone. You can text that number. You get direct access to me and not just an answering service or a voicemail message. I am available pretty much nearly 24/7, but for the wee hours in the morning. But if you have in a car accident case, a slip and fall, or you're charged with a crime in Philadelphia, New Jersey, or Delaware, I am always happy to help you and be available as a resource for you.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.